One of the stories, if not the main story, that's dominated the news agenda today. I mean, it's awful. As I speak, a serious search and rescue operation is underway in Italy. Of course, this is after a luxury yacht, a super yacht, seems to be caught up in some kind of freak weather event. I'm going to cross live now to GB News reporter Adam Cherry. He joins me from the site of that search in Sicily. Good evening to you, Adam.
Good evening.
So bring us up to speed with what's been happening.
So I've been moving around throughout the area today, and there's an area, a small area on the port itself, which has been cordoned off and is being used exclusively by emergency services. And there's been a helicopter on there which has been circling the area for about every 30 to 45 minutes over the last couple of hours. On the waters itself, there are 5 ships. There's an underwater vessel, as you heard during the bulletins. And the problem they're having is that despite the fact that the boat is very close to the shore, it's relatively shallow, although about 50 meters or so. Because of the position of it, the hull has landed on the seabed, and the fact that the entire hull has remained almost entirely intact, it's very, very difficult to see inside the vessel, let alone to get in there. Now, obviously, we're now entering what is looking like the 3rd day of this rescue operation, and time is clearly of the essence. There was a statement released by the Italian fire brigade, fire service, earlier today saying, realistically, they feel like this is becoming a recovery mission rather than a rescue mission. Although there is some counter to that from engineers who say, given the size of this super yacht, it's possible there are air pockets big enough to sustain life for perhaps another day or so. So it's not as if hope has been extinguished yet, and 15 people have been rescued, albeit they were rescued almost immediately. 3 of them have now been discharged from hospital as well. So there is some good news here, but it's still a very, very tricky situation here.
I've got to say, this has just been released very recently, some breaking news. In fact, that new CCTV footage has been released showing the so-called super yacht sinking, apparently, during a storm off the coast of Italy. I've got to say, this super yacht, estimated to be in the region of £30 million, 6 cabin, 12 passengers, 10 crew, apparently, is what it would normally have on. It's now thought to be marooned 164 feet below the surface. We've just been hearing about some of the complexities of that rescue operation. Divers have been struggling to spend more than 10 minutes when they're on their search. I've got to say, joining me live now in the studio is a friend of Mike Lynch, also the co-founder of the business Autonomy. We'll come on to discuss autonomy. And I wonder, how are you feeling today, David, among this? It's a horrendous situation. It seems to have come out of nowhere. We just had the news that Mike was acquitted after spending over a decade of his life fighting for his reputation over those fraud charges relating to Autonomy, the company that you guys co-founded way back when. I mean, how's today been like for you?
Awful. I mean, Mike is a very human man. He's probably the most resilient human being I've ever met in my life. I've never heard him tell a lie. I think he has an incisive personality. If anyone could still exist in these terrible physical circumstances, if there is an air pocket, he'd have found it. So let's just keep our fingers crossed, first of all. I don't want to talk about him in the past tense.
No, absolutely not. And I think it is just, I mean, nobody knows what the future holds. Life can change literally on a sixpence. And I was listening to an interview that Mike gave very recently, actually, after he was acquitted. And the strength of his character was so clear then, because when it comes to federal criminal cases, I think acquittal happens in something like 0.5% of those cases. And I think that to think about the result that Mike got shows that strength of character that you've just been describing. So tell us about him. What is he like?
He's one of the rarest beasts you'll ever find. He is a great scientist. He's a teacher. He's a good communicator. He's a businessman. And unlike most entrepreneurs, he can get the big idea right, but also manage everything. He has an intense, focused energy, and I think a real sense of equity. There are 3 or 4 entrepreneurs of our generation, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, I wouldn't put Elon Musk in that category, who can do everything. And he can. And it's been an honour to work with him and know him the last 30 years.
And have you spoke to his family?
No, I have not been. The last time I spoke to him, we were swapping messages earlier on, last week, talking about meeting up at his place in Suffolk, talking about hearing aids.
Yeah.
We've both suffered some hearing loss, and he was talking about maybe using AI to look at ways of accelerating the effectiveness of these devices. And the important thing here is that Autonomy was probably the first big artificial intelligence company on the planet, let alone in Britain.
Yeah, I mean, tell us about that. So how did you guys come together? How did you form Autonomy?
Well, what happened is I'm a technology entrepreneur who also was a writer, and I was involved in investment banking, but I loved the internet. So we started probably the country's first internet service provider, which is called Demon. Might use that. And we both had a passion for video games. And at the time, his venture capitalist was a company called Apax Partners, a very big British success story. And I said, look, I'm getting really obsessed with AI, and in particular something called artificially intelligent autonomous agents, quite a mouthful. But these are little pieces of software that represent you and talk to each other on the internet. And we're just beginning now, 30 years later, to see these. And I said, I've got these ideas. And they said, well, you must come and meet Dr. Lynch. We've got a stake in his business. And we got drunk a few times and came up with something. And then we're both dog fans. And we came up with the idea. Bear in mind, there was no Google. This was pre-search engine. We invented a dog that ran around the internet and sniffed and barked every time it found something. And you know what? Within 6 or 7 years, the business was worth $10 billion. And I was very, very proud of that business and being involved in it.
And I think, obviously, Autonomy, that's when many people, perhaps outside of the tech industry, would perhaps have become familiar with Mike's name because, of course, he then sold the business for $11 billion to HP. Within about a year or so, HP were then having to write down that investment by, I think, about 8-point-something billion pounds, and then lots of allegations then came about. And I think one of the kind of tragedies in what's been unfolding over the last kind of 48 hours or so is whenever we're reading this story, we're now hearing all about these allegations. And what happened to Mike was actually really quite staggering and incredibly scary. He was extradited, of course, to the US. He describes being put in chains. I mean, it's really quite unfathomable. House arrest for a long time. All of this went on for over a decade. How was he during that time?
Well, I kept in touch and offered support. I hadn't been involved in Autonomy since the late 90s, but I can tell you this. We live in the time on the planet at the moment, we've got massive, massive changes going on in technology, and I don't think the institutions that govern countries are keeping up with this. So, in a way, the really dangerous part of modern society is when government and big business and the law become intertwined so you can't tell where one starts and the other begins. So in Britain, we have the post office scandal and all those hundreds of postmasters. I mean, it's terrible. Mike Lynch was a billionaire. He's a billionaire with the most extraordinary intellect and with the most extraordinary resilience. He dug down, and undoubtedly he would have been in prison if it weren't for his wealth, his intelligence, his commitment. But who wants to lose 10 or 12 years of your life doing that? But he did that. And I think that is a lesson that we have to learn now on both sides of the Atlantic. When business gets into government and owns the law, we're all of us vulnerable. All of us.
Yeah, and this is something that Mike was actually speaking out quite passionately about very recently after he was acquitted. He was saying, and I quote directly, "It has to be wrong for a US prosecutor to have more power over British citizens in England than UK police do. He was talking about what he sees and feels passionately is about an imbalance between a UK-US extradition treaty. And this was something that he seemed to be very passionate about campaigning to change.
Well, what we had after 9/11, governments realised they needed more clarity, they needed more information, and then we got a kind of creeping malaise where unilateral powers were granted to authorities around the world. And the extradition treaty, which quite properly allowed the US to extradite potential terrorists from the UK, was meant to be a reciprocal two-way agreement. But the Senate, well, no, this is a breach of our human rights. So we have this one-way extradition treaty. And, as long as a US court can actually get a grand jury approval, which is really easy, they can command an extradition. And in the States, if you have charges against you, federal charges against you, basically it's game over unless you've got hundreds of millions of dollars. There's a less than 1% acquittal rate because they want everybody to enter a plea bargain. So there's a lot of injustice in the world. There always has been. But Mike stands, to me, as a champion of free will and really should be celebrating his country as a leading entrepreneur and as a freedom fighter in a way. I know that's a little dramatic, but to me, he's a hero.
Yeah, and I think I've got to say to a lot of people, I've been watching a lot of tributes actually being paid to him. There's a lot of people, former colleagues, former business partners, because he is incredibly innovative from what I understand him to be. And when he was interviewed very recently and he was asked, well, what's next for you? Innovate, to continue innovating. So he, despite everything he'd gone through, he hadn't lost that spirit to keep on creating, doing the things that entrepreneurs like yourself, it makes you tick, I imagine.
Yes, but I mean, he's exceptional because there is no intellectual weakness to the man. His character is strong. His focus is laser-like. But right now, we have to have our economic sovereignty back. We should be encouraging and celebrating our entrepreneurs. That is what's going to drag us out of our current malaise.
And do you think we do enough? Because in America, there's this whole kind of sense that, business and success and wealth and all the rest of it, it's celebrated, it's admired. Whereas here, we do tend to have this kind of mindset of he's really wealthy or she's really wealthy, we must attack them, batter down their wealth, kind of spread out all of this and that and the other. Do you think we need to have a more encouraging mindset of entrepreneurialism?
I think if we don't, we're just going to become a third world country. We have to show people that the way to get out of this economic malaise is by digging in, by being ambitious, by being positive, by understanding how to create capital, and by basically making sure that our governments understand this and don't throw a brain drain right in our faces, which could basically lead the country into decades of near poverty. Listen, this is a wonderful country full of the most exciting innovation. We have to build a consensus that creates wealth. And Mike Lynch is probably Britain's greatest businessman of the last 35 years.
Indeed, and of course, so many people watching this will be praying for Mike, not just Mike, of course, his daughter. She is also missing on that yacht. His wife, Angela, was rescued from that. I mean, she apparently is in a wheelchair. She's had some injuries. Hopefully, she will make a quick recovery. But, I mean, just to imagine what she's going through.
Horrible. And, my prayers are with the family. And, I just hope there's a miracle coming. And if anyone can pull it off, it'll be Mike Lynch.
Yeah, I mean, here's hoping and praying. Oh, it makes one fill with goosebumps because we never really know what's around the corner. I've got to ask you about this as well. Someone else, Stephen Chamberlain, he was a co-defendant who was also acquitted in the trial that concluded in June. Now, he's also, well, not also, but he very sadly was in an accident over the weekend and now has lost his life. There's a lot of people and a lot of speculation. I'm not really, I don't want to go down paths of conspiracy and all the rest of it, but a lot of people are pointing out that this is very peculiar, that these two men, both of them acquitted, have now, one's confirmed to have lost their life and another one is feared to. What do you think to that?
Well, let's look at the facts. On Saturday night, there were two co-defendants that Autonomy had at this point. They both were acquitted, and they both had, let's hope it's not a fatal accident, but they've both essentially been eliminated within 24 hours. Now, that is a ghastly coincidence, and I think we should let the facts emerge, but it's an extraordinary coincidence.
Yeah, and let me ask you this as well. When Mike was acquitted, you said that Priti Patel should essentially hang her head in shame, I think.
I think we have to defend our business people. I think we have to defend the rights and the sovereignty. I think it was pretty clear. Look, Autonomy, again, I wasn't involved in the last 12, 13 years of the business, but, you know, Mike will tell you it made, in the year that Hewlett-Packard wrote this company down and accused him of mis-selling the business. This was a company making 360 million profit. That's not a Ponzi scheme. Now, maybe there may have been 1 or 2 million of you know, bad debts or something, but it was making 360 million. And as I say, the inability to defend our own people when the serious fraud officer said, no case to answer, this isn't right. It isn't right. And one of the things we now have to do as a country, what do we stand for? And how do we defend our people? How do we stand up for what's right? Because this nation is brilliant, but to do that, we need to understand the rule of law and how it applies to our own population.
Indeed, and I will, if you are just joining us, I will just replay that CCTV footage. You can see there the so-called super yacht apparently sinking during what many are calling a freak weather event off the coast of Italy. Now, Italian rescuers, David, they're saying essentially this is it's a rescue, you know, it's a search, and they don't really seem to hold out much hope. Another expert apparently says that the next 24 hours are critical, and that hopefully your friend and colleague and everyone else that's trapped in that yacht might have found air pockets. And I do just want to finish again, just final words about Mike. How will he, if he is fortunate enough, we know he's a fighter, we know he's come through horrendous situations so far in his life and he's come out triumphant. Let's all hope that this is the case now. You know, he's a strong man from what you say. So how will he be trying to kind of, I mean, how does one even operate in this environment to try and keep positive?
Well, I mean, if there's any chance of him surviving this, he has the strength to do this. And I hope that we aren't talking the past tense. He is a remarkable man. And if you've had the blessing and the honour to have worked with him or known him, he's a force of nature and somebody who I think will become a business, an intellectual and scientific legend in the decades to come.
Well, here's hoping so. GB News, all of us, our thoughts are with Mike. Of course, there's 6 people, including Mike, currently trapped. Very intense rescue operation underway in Italy as we speak. Of course, we'll all be praying for a successful, safe outcome. David Tabizel, thoughts with you, all of his friends, and of course, all of Mike Lynch's family. Thank you very much for your time. OK, I mean, as I've just been saying there to David Tabizel, none of us know what tomorrow may bring. We ultimately only have today.